Okay, this is a tutorial about dragging and dropping, making things drag and droppable in TouchDesigner. So just to show you what it looks like, I've got two different things here. I can drag and drop them, let them go, and they'll stay there. If I drag and drop them into this rectangle, they disappear. When the banana disappears, it adds one to this number up here. The moth also disappears, but doesn't change anything, whatever. So I also can make it pretty easily so that it's not that the banana disappears. Oh, by the way, I have a button to bring them back, which I guess I can just display that on the perform window. But let's try it again. So if I go back here, I can drag them around. The banana disappears, the moth disappears, and then I can click this button to bring them back. The other thing is I can make it so that instead of just disappearing, which is just turning on the display on or off button or parameter for this container, which is the whole trick, right? I'm dragging these around because they're containers that are draggable. I'll show that in a second. But I could also just make this so instead of changing display parameter, they change the enable parameter. And what that'll do is the same thing, except when I drag and drop it into this rectangle, it just makes it so I can't grab it anymore. And then clicking the button brings it back. So there's a lot that's possible. And everything on the bottom here is how I made it happen. These are draggable containers that just have an image stuck to them. It works, and we can figure out pretty easily whether they're being dropped on top of a certain area of the screen, and I'll show that to you. But this bottom half is how I did it using mostly kind of separate operators like logic and hold. There are these two expression operators which have a little bit of Python in them. It's kind of like, this is just about the button to reset it over here. So, there's some things going on here. It's a bit of a puzzle to make it all work. I will say it's kind of not worth it because this does the same thing. So what I'll do is actually get rid of all the banana stuff on the bottom, and I'll get rid of the rectangle stuff too. And what I'll do is just show you this other version. So if we look here, I've got a draggable moth. And in fact, if I drag it over here, it does disappear. So let's bring it back by turning display on. Just to show you how this works, if I want to make a container that's draggable, I just double click and add a container comp and make sure under panel that its drag to reposition parameter is set to component. I do need an image here, so I'll just add a movie file in and get the banana and drag that on top and say that's the background top. You can see it's stretched weird, and that's because the container has its own size. It's 400 by 300, but the image is, if I click on here, it's 720p, so that's 16 by 9. So I could do like a variation of 16 by 9, like 800 by 450. Whoops. 450. That now is a 16 by 9 ratio, and it works. So let's look and see if that's there. There's the banana, and I can drag it around, but in a very limited area. So for whatever reason, the dragging and dropping happens within this very small range, 0 to 100. Let's just make it like something that will guarantee that I can drag it anywhere I want. So I'm just doing minus 1000 to 1000 for both the X and Y range. And now I should be able to drag it anywhere. Works. When I let go, it just drags it, just stops. Now, it doesn't have this behavior where it disappears if I drag it in that area. Not yet. But that's just this. And in fact, this isn't even necessary. So it's really just these few ops. So how does it work? First of all, there is if we use the panel op and just look at everything that the panel op gives us, it gives us a ton of information about how that, about channels, about this component, this container. So some of them we've seen before, like UV is like where the mouse is, and there's drag and so on. But there's one specifically that is called reposition. And if we kind of only select that one parameter, what we'll see is that when we are dragging this thing around, this changes to a 1. And when we let go, it changes to a 0. So that's pretty handy because what we can do is just from here add a chop exec and say we want to run a little bit of Python when this changes from a 1 to a 0, meaning someone let go of the mouse and dropped it somewhere. So what does that Python look like? First of all, I only want to pay attention to on to off conditions, right? So this is literally like when it's a 1 and changes to a 0, meaning someone dropped it. So that's what we're going to pay attention to. And then I've gotten rid of all the other sample code here. So it just has the on to off function. So it normally looks like, hang on. This is the most frustrating part of TouchDesigner to me, but let's just do it in here. So it normally looks like this, right? With nothing in it. But what I did was just added a little bit of Python, and it's very simple. Basically, I just made a variable. I can call it anything I want. I could have called it C. That would have been even shorter. But it's just a way to not have to type this operator bit over and over again in the next line. So I'm saying cont represents the container2 operator over here. So what I'm going to do is say, first of all, I've got a channel here that tells whether it's being repositioned or not. And then I've got some parameters like X and Y. Those are parameters that tell where it is. So as I drag this thing around, those numbers change. So I'm going to use both of those things. So actually, just the parameters, just the X and Y parameters in this code. So what I'm doing is saying if the parameter called X from container2 is greater than 600. So that's kind of like an area off to the right of the screen. As long as it's past that area, past that line of 600 and less than 850. These numbers are large. We're used to seeing very small numbers, but these are in pixels. So what we're saying is basically like some area that's kind of in the right side of the screen, but not all the way because it is 1280 wide. So there's some area way over to the right that isn't affected. And you can picture the rectangle that I had there, the white rectangle. That's kind of like the left and right edges of that rectangle. So I'm separating those with an and because I want to say if it's if X is greater than 600 and it's less than 850 and Y is greater than 0 and Y is also is less than 300. So what I'm doing is for that rectangle, that white rectangle I made, or at least that approximate area, I'm basically saying if they dropped the butterfly, then this bit of code will get triggered, of course. And the next thing I'm doing is checking to see where it was in an X and Y when it got dropped. If it was in this kind of box that I'm setting up, then do the next line, which is just turning off the display parameter. So that makes it disappear. I could also change this to enable, and that would make it undraggable at that point. But this is it. This is the whole thing. And, even without knowing too much Python, you have to know that there has to be a colon at the end here. This has to be indented. But that's really it as far as syntax goes. You'll see an error if it didn't work. But that's it. I don't even need this parameter. This is showing me the two X and Y parameters just so I can see them on screen. But I don't even need that. It'll still work. So that is a way to get it to do dragging and dropping. Now, if you have a lot of these, I suppose you could just copy and paste this a bunch of times. You may look at the other video where I showed kind of like the idea of starting to make a game in TouchDesigner where I use a replicator comp. So if you got this all working, you could use the replicator to kind of reproduce this from a table that says where the butterflies should show up on the screen. But you could also just copy and paste this and it'll still work. So that's the simple explanation. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how you can make things that drag and drop.